Hi, welcome to Adventuring for Knowledge. This is Adventure Call number 1.
Guess what? This is Adventure Call number 2.
And what comes after 2, Manny?
Is it 3?
Yep, you got it. It's Adventure Call number 3.
Last call. Welcome to our podcast.
It's adventure time.
So we're here, ladies and gentlemen. We're live.
We're live.
We're here at Sunday morning.
Who do we have here today, Manny?
We have Jon and Erin, Fierce Love Organics. Is that right?
Fierce Love Farm.
Fierce Love Farm. There we go.
And then do you have a separate company name for your when you sell, or is it Fierce Love Farms?
So we're Fierce Love Farm, and we sell and lease land at a collective, which is Haliburton Community Organic Farm Society. So we're part of, we market under the Haliburton name for the most part.
Yeah.
And farm at the Haliburton Community Farm. But our individual business is Fierce Love Farm.
Awesome.
Yeah. So within that community, there's different farms.
Exactly.
Oh.
Do you know a guy by the name of Derek Powell?
Yep.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
I know Derek.
So
He's going to come and chat with us too.
Oh, okay.
That's great.
Yeah, Derek's awesome. I've known him for years. And his brother Gary.
Yeah.
You guys met Gary?
I haven't met Gary yet. No.
Awesome.
No.
So he comes in.
So Derek used to farm at the same, not on the same plot as us.
Yeah.
But at Haliburton, he was one of the earlier members, and it's an incubator farm. So it means it's there to incubate new farm businesses.
Yeah.
And then you move off and transition onto hopefully more permanent land. So Derek started his business there and then has continued leasing on other properties.
If you got questions about garlic, he is your man.
Yeah?
Yeah, he knows garlic.
What's his company? West Coast
West Coast Garlic.
West Coast Garlic. Yeah, there you
We
go.
get a lot
Sing
of
that name.
garlic from- yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself individually, and then when you became a team, and we'll pick on anything that we feel like we are going to expand, and something that people can learn from.
Right on.
So we'll start with ladies first.
Yes, of course.
So I grew up in North Vancouver and was sort of had a typical suburban life. Both my parents are teachers, and so I grew up in Deep Cove, which is an absolutely stunning community. Used to be a little bit more rural than it is now.
That's right below Mount Seymour, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and spent most of my life there. Didn't have any background in terms of my immediate family in farming.
She's a dancer.
The
You're a
closest,
dancer.
yeah, the
Not
closest.
a dancer.
Ballet, mostly. And spent until I was 18 in Vancouver, and then moved to Victoria.
Yeah.
And have been sort of back and forth in between the two. And most of my family is from the island too. I spent all my summers on the island, up island in Qualicum. That's where my grandma was.
Qualicum is beautiful.
Yeah.
So this were you immersed in the community that you lived in
So
Vancouver?
Deep Cove has changed a lot, but when I was growing up, it was quite a small community. There was sort of a big gap between Deep Cove and anything further west of that was just, there was a big forest used to be there. So it was a pretty small, I went to a very small school, it was a very small high school.
So you knew everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a very small community, and it was a fabulous place to grow up because we lived in the rainforest, basically.
Oh,
Do
that's
you
so
know
nice.
people by the name of Cindy Laresser and Glen?
No.
No. Anyways.
That's not that small.
We're just throwing out.
I'm just throwing names. Well, they do Derek.
It's true.
No, it's not that small. So it was a great place to grow up. I mean, we always talk about the rain if you're from Deep Cove, because it rains about 3 times more than the rest of Vancouver, which is 3 times more than Victoria.
Yeah.
So it's
But I love
fabulously
the rain.
green. Yeah,
I love the rain. It's beautiful.
It
It
makes
washes things away. It hydrates us. It hydrates the land.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Highly debatable, but
Well, I think that
Next podcast.
I think that informed, just it's when you grow up in that sort of natural setting, it's what you always want to come back to. I've never lived more than 5 minutes from the ocean, I don't think, my whole life. So it was John and I moved to the Okanagan for a while, and I loved it, but it was difficult for me, and I had to move back to here.
So how did you got into farming?
So
Do you remember a spot where it was like
Was there a
completely
catalyst
changed?
event?
there wasn't a specific event. It was more of a slow transition. It actually started, I think the way it starts for a lot of people, especially a lot of young women, is just by being interested in food. And the reason why I got interested in food was because I was really involved in yoga and was doing my yoga teacher training. And I was 18, going to UVic, was studying environmental studies, and got very into food politics. So that sort of started my journey into food, but the farming part came much later. I was doing my master's, and people ask me all the time, but I don't really remember how I decided to focus
Just
more on
evolved.
agricultural systems and food policy, other than that I was really into food and to cooking and food politics and where my food came from to some degree. I mean, my knowledge was pretty limited. And so I was studying more of the policy side of agriculture.
What's food politics? I've never heard that term.
Well, it's just what it sounds like, pretty much. It's the
Yeah.
politics
So we don't want to talk about it?
I mean, that would be a
That's
podcast
a whole new
series.
podcast. Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, just where your food is coming from. I mean, food
Right.
is exceptionally political.
Yeah.
Right? For me, it came from, at that time, I was vegetarian, so that was sort of my gateway into food politics and food policy. And while I was doing my master's and studying that, I figured, well, I should actually have more of a grounded knowledge in what I'm doing, because policy doesn't really make sense if you can't use the language that you need to
I get
engage
it,
with people at a really involved level. So I couldn't speak to farmers if I didn't know anything about farming. So I started volunteering at the UBC farm there, which led to taking a practicum program in sustainable agriculture there.
And you absolutely loved it.
And that, pretty much I loved it. So I was at that time also started running school garden programs. So I sort of thought that would be the direction I would go in, but I actually loved growing the food so much that I transitioned into the actual production side. And then once I had that knowledge, I think that I really felt, not that in a bad way, but I had this responsibility that if I know how to grow food, I should be growing food. So I took that really seriously and started farming
That's awesome.
then, and that was in 2012. So I've been farming full time since then.
Cool. Were you running high school programs, gardening?
Elementary
school?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
That's
I was
really
working
cool.
with a great organization called Earth Bites, and so it was gardening and nutrition. So I worked with a holistic nutritionist, and he would do the indoor making food from the garden with the kids and teaching them really simple recipes, and then I would work
That is so
outside
beautiful.
in the school gardens with the kids.
Hope is
So-
gonna love this.
Yeah, it's definitely the most fun job I've ever had. It was
Yeah.
wonderful. We worked with Rocky Mountain Flatbread Company
Yeah.
in Vancouver, as a pizza company, and they run a whole nonprofit educational society, and they started the Earth Bites organization, and
Yeah.
it was
I
wonderful
went through
people to work
a
with.
similar project. I went to a school called Sundance. It was an alternative learning school, and they had people come in like that and teach us how to farm. When we were like 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, and it's more common, I think, in the Waldorf and the alternative
Yeah.
schools, and we were just, one of the schools we worked with was Montessori, but most of them were just public schools that, some of them had some small gardens and other ones didn't, and we went in and built the gardens with the parents and the teachers. So, it
So
was-
you think it's essential to introduce children to that ideology of farming and producing your own food since the very beginning, since a young age?
I mean, I think what's more fundamental than
Food.
eating, right? If we're going
Exactly.
to teach kids how to code in kindergarten and grade 1, why aren't we teaching them
How to
how to
grow their
grow
own
food,
food.
or at least where their food comes from,
Yeah.
so that they can have
Yeah.
the knowledge to make, comes back to food politics,
And the-
right? They can
right,
have the
the
knowledge
power
to
to
make
make the right
decisions.
decisions.
Yeah.
So I feel like you have a deep, deep love for food that has been evolving through your whole life, and it's
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, my mom was a prof, a college professor, and worked full time, but we always ate at home. She always cooked.
Yeah.
You know, it was like her having 2 full-time jobs. And my aunt was also super influential. That side of the family was all Italian, and so my aunt
there. It is.
cooked for us all the time. So that was probably sort of my gateway,
Yeah.
was my aunt's pasta sauce. When everybody asked, it was like my favorite food, and my
That's your
favorite
weakness,
food memory
eh?
was my aunt's pasta sauce.
And then once you decide all this knowledge and once you acquired it, you want to share it. Is that the main the main goal and how to.
Yeah, I think that started out that way. It became maybe a little bit more selfish in that I actually really enjoy working outside, working with my hands and working by myself is sort of what keeps me going. And definitely connecting around food is important to me. I would say that that's more up John's alley. He's more extroverted than I am.
Yeah.
I'm more of an introvert. I really enjoy working by myself and growing the food.
Yeah.
Whereas he really loves talking to people about food. He'll go into it, but he's worked in kitchens a lot.
Yeah.
He's an excellent
How did you meet
cook.
John?
Why don't you tell the story of how we met?
We'll transition.
Okay. Well, my journey into food started at a young age too. I grew up in Richmond, and when I was a kid, it was predominantly just farmers and fishermen. That's all it was. So my dad's parents had a property in East Richmond, and they actually had 3/4 of an acre's worth of growing space.
Oh, beautiful.
And so they grew with the seasons. They composted as they went. Like they had the whole trench system where all of their compostables went right back into the garden and whatnot. And they really kind of lived with the land. And I mean, they dug holes in their garage in the wintertime and stored all their beets and their carrots. And they're eating that all year round. Like it was great.
So they were immersed into it.
Oh man, like I remember walking into the garage and there was just shelves of pickles and whatnot, and walking into the boot room and there was like the stone crock that smelled like somebody let one go all the time.
Ukrainian.
Yeah, grandpa.
Yeah.
Papa just loved his sauerkraut, but to get sauerkraut going, it can be a stinky business. But so anyways, they preserved their own food, they grew their own food, and I know that was a huge learning curve for my mom as well, because she was coming from an Irish family where my grandma just boiled everything. And so Nana basically taught her all about, cooking vegetables and kind of getting into the preservation side. But anyways, we had a little tiny garden at our own home growing up. And it just so happened that the neighborhood that I was in, like every other neighbor had their own like growing space, and they're all growing food, and we come home from school and there'd be like a box of cucumbers and like pints of blueberries and stuff like just on our front doorstep because Bruce next door had way too much, or Mr. Conley across the street had like too much cauliflower.
That's awesome.
It was really, really special to grow up in. And
was this the catalyst for you to get into that? Was this introduction with seeing how people were interacting with their food and how food was connecting everybody, creating a community through farming?
Absolutely. It was a huge driving factor. I mean, like if, just one little neighborhood could benefit, and just one family, like I can just talk about myself. I mean, like we were all a pretty close-knit neighborhood, and this is like 20 houses maybe. If just one 20 house, little neighborhood could, benefit from sharing, their abundance together, then why can't the whole world kind of follow suit? And so, it's just one of those things that kind of drove me. And when I got out of high school, I'm like, I thought I was going to be a journalist. I thought I was going to do this and that. And because I kind of took my time playing with that notion, I did what I loved to do in the meantime, which was cooking. So I was going to Kwantlen. I got my drafting certificate, but in the evenings I was cooking. And then, basically for the next 4 years, I was working at a couple restaurants. I worked at a bakery at the same time. I barely had time to sleep because I was just so busy.
Good.
Yeah.
I love that.
I loved it. Like it was just one of those things that I'm like, I'm going to go to the Pacific, Culinary Arts Institute, and I'm going to become a big chef. But the culture around the kitchen, and I'm sure if you ever interview a chef, they'll attest to this. It'll chew you up and spit you out.
Yeah.
So there's, the restaurant one of the restaurants I was working in that demanded the most amount of my time and attention. It was, there's a seedy side to it. And the people that were kind of, getting ahead and getting the apprenticeships and that kind of thing, it wasn't so much about the skill, it was more about the, who you knew.
The politics behind it.
Exactly. So like and this is where kind of like restaurant politics, and food politics all started kind of coming into play. I was looking at the quality of ingredients but this was back in 1999 to 2002 kind of era. We were getting a lot of stuff that was, coming like trucked in and not exactly local. Yeah. And I just remember going home and I'm like, man, the food I make at home is so much different from the stuff I make at the restaurant. And I just like I feel a lot more nourished by, the stuff I make at home. And anyways, long story short, I ended up, tiring myself out. I moved up north to Grand Prairie, and I actually ended up working the oil patch for about 6 months.
As a cook?
No, as a rig hand. Oh. And that kind of had a little effect. Like getting in there and actually seeing, some of the stuff that people turn a blind eye to up there, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So I got into the service side of things, which ended getting me up into instrumentation and dewatering. So it was more filtering out all the impurities and that stuff in their fluids, and that got me interested in environmental stewardship. So I left the oil patch. I came back down to Vancouver, and I started volunteering for the Lower Mainland Green Team. And I ended up volunteering at the UBC farm as well. And
there it is.
I did a couple volunteer sessions there, and I saw this one autumn day where the sun was setting at just the right time, and like the mist was starting to come up. There's this woman in this like black cardigan,
this sweater
covered in dirt.
The same sweater that I'm wearing.
No way, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I wear it all the time to remind him.
Oh.
No, it's just really warm.
It was something like out of a commercial. Like the sun was basically setting right behind her, and it's And it's like, who is that? I have to volunteer here more often. So basically not just because of Erin, but
probably just because of Erin.
Probably just because. I was also working as a carpenter at this point as well. Cool. And I kind of found myself torn between, this growing interest in woodworking and then also this passion for environmental stewardship. And so...
How did you choose?
He still does both.
I still do both. But what I decided to do back then was something I never thought I would do, which was actually make a decision on something. Yeah. And so I said, I'm going to go out on a limb here because I feel really passionately about this. And I quit my job as a carpenter, and I applied for the practicum, and I got in. And so I spent the next year at UBC Farm taking the practicum in sustainable agriculture. Yeah. And we ended up dating outside of the program.
When was his the what? Assistant instructor / field mentor.
Student-teacher relationship.
So we both basically really got involved with farming through this program. Yeah. So I'll just hype the program a little bit. It's the UBC Farm Practicum in Sustainable Agriculture. Yeah. At the Center for Sustainable Food Systems at UBC. And so I took it in 2012 and John took it in 2013, and we both had the same teacher there, DeLisa Lewis, who now farms up in the Cowichan Valley. And I think that's really the reason that we both decided to switch into farming as a career, was because of her.
Because of her, she inspired you.
100%.
Yeah,
she taught you
so
everything.
many people have become farmers or at least significantly more knowledgeable in food systems because of her guidance and her teaching.
If you were to explain it, how was her teaching technique? So how did she inspire you? What did you learn from her? So
she is definitely is a prof now at UBC too. Yeah. At the time she was doing her PhD, she's definitely a facilitative teacher. So she's not a teacher who just stands up at the front and lectures. She really expects people to use their own brains and facilitates them drawing the knowledge out for themselves. Awesome. Yeah. So that's the way you remember things.
And it draws out a scenario and say, hey, what would you do to solve this scenario?
Definitely, questions-based person. It sometimes is a little bit, you kind of got to push her to get, well, what do you think is the right answer here, Dr. Lewis? So she's an extremely humble person, but
humble.
also one of the most knowledgeable people that we know. So she just inspires, I think, everybody that she works with. I've never met a student of DeLisa's who doesn't sort of posit her as a number one influence in their life. And
That's
we're very
awesome.
lucky to still be very connected with her and to have moved to the island a few years before we did. So
And what are the skills that you learned from this program? Like, what are, if you were to nail it down to like 5 to 10 things?
Sure.
Prioritized.
Yeah.
What was 1 through 5?
Soil stewardship would be probably number one.
And what
like,
is
front
soil
and center.
stewardship?
So soil stewardship is understanding the medium in which you're growing with. And do you guys know who Elliot Coleman is? Elliot Coleman wrote a book called The New Organic Grower. He's written quite a few books at this point. And he has a 5-acre farm, I believe, down in Wisconsin. Vermont, sorry.
Vermont, yeah.
And so I mean, like, it's basically like what he says is that you can make any soil work, no matter how unworkable it is. You have to come at it from a particular angle and from a biological angle. Now, in order to get your soil to a particular point where it is going to start, you're going to be working with it. It's going to be working with you. It requires testing, or requires input. It requires a lot of physical input as well. And it requires a lot of understanding and respect with what's happening in just a teaspoon of soil. I mean, there's millions of microbes in just one tiny teaspoon, and all those microbes require nutrients, or specific nutrients. And so if you can understand your soil's needs, you can grow anything. And not only that, the whole entire piece of land that you're working benefits from that. And so that might bring us to what I think is the second part, is environmental stewardship. Because everything is connected to that soil. We're all, like, people, animals, insects, everything. It's all connected to that soil.
Yeah, and so the program, the focus, DeLisa, our teacher, is a soil scientist. So that's the basis of organic agriculture. It's feed the soil, not the plant. We're focusing on the growing medium. And then the program that we took, the practicum program at UBC, spanned all the way from there up to marketing your products and everything in between. So how to grow organic food, and in the most sustainable and regenerative organic way that you can within your own system, and then how to actually make a living doing that.
Yeah. And so is your farm right now fully organic?
Yep.
Yes, so all of the farms at Haliburton, where we farm, are certified organic, and we are certified through the Island's Organic Producer Association. So there's standards that happen at the Canadian level, and then we have an association of all the organic certification bodies, which is who certifies us in BC, which is COABC. Yeah. And then IOPA, the Islands Organic Producers Association, is our local certification body, and so I'm on the certification committee for that too. Cool. So we make decisions around what inputs we're approving for farms, and farms come to us with questions if things are allowed, and we do the reports for the inspection. So all the organic farms who are certified organic, which nowadays, to use the term organic in BC, you have to be certified organic.
Yeah, of course.
Are going through an inspection process every year. So
That's
it
awesome.
is a relatively rigorous system.
That's good.
Especially
and needed.
Yeah, especially on the islands, we have one of the stricter certification bodies. It was developed by a lot of the early sort of 70s organic farmers who really came from a back to the land, more hippie perspective of, in a good way.
Exactly,
of this isn't just about commercial enterprise and about people knowing that there aren't pesticides on their food. It's about a lot more than that. It's about being soil stewards and caring for the land.
Having soil stewardship.
So being involved in farming in the community that we're in on Vancouver Island and on the Gulf and Discovery Islands is really wonderful, because we still have these farmers who've been doing it for a long time here, who are mentoring young farmers and who are still really involved in the certification process.
And what are the health benefits of
Sorry, Manny,
organic?
why is it better
Yeah.
than non-organic?
Is it better? Is it not?
This is where food politics
Exactly.
kind of
And I want to dive into it
Opinion,
because we
right?
want to know why.
Why should we eat organic?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's what we don't want to cause divisions between other
No, of
farmers
course
because
not, yeah.
we think that everybody who is farming is contributing to our
Absolutely,
society.
right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we are certified organic, and we believe and advocate that one of the main reasons that we are organic is not just a marketing thing. It's not so that we can put a stamp on our food and say we're certified organic and
Yeah.
therefore you can trust it. That's really important. But for us, it's also because being certified is what gives people who farm in the way that we do and who believe in the same sort of base values that we do, it gives us a voice within the agriculture industry. If we're not certified as a group, then we don't have a collective voice. A lot of people don't get certified and then just say, oh, we grow using organic practices, which again, you shouldn't be saying now in BC because you need to be certified. To those people always say, well, we need lobbying power. And if we come together under a title, which is certified organic, then it gives us a voice. So that's not a direct health benefit, but that's something that if organic farmers have a voice collectively certified, that's going to increase the visibility of what we're doing.
And what are the beliefs and values behind organic produce, organic foods?
That's a really important question because, I mean, when you... it might sound silly, like it's just a word, it's just organic. But the thing is that accountability for us as farmers should give the general public a sense of relief that, we're held to certain standards. And those standards embody, again, I always come back to this environmental stewardship. And that's first and foremost for me, is that the piece of land that we're taking care of is being taken care of. And that includes the pollinators, that includes, all the creatures and resources that are on that piece. It ensures that, we have good and clean farming practices, that, we're not bringing any kind of subpar product to you. And
it's I think sometimes we conflate organic as being the same everywhere, and a lot of the tenets of it are the same, but there are actually some pretty distinct differences between the US and Canada, and I bring that up because a lot of the food that we're buying is imported American organic food. And so in Canada, and this isn't to say it isn't the case in the States, but a lot of farmers in the States have been advocating to have stricter regulations. So one of the things that we have that's stricter in Canada is things around animal welfare. So a lot of people think of organic food being just about whether or not it's been sprayed with pesticides, insecticides, and herbicides, or whether it's had synthetic fertilizers used. So that's usually the main difference that we talk about when we're talking about conventionally grown food and organically grown food is the inputs. So we're under organics, we do use certain pesticides are approved, but they're different in terms of the biological
composition
of them and how they disseminate themselves in the environment, the effects they have in the environment, and then what kind of inputs we use. So in organic farming, we're using naturally derived fertilizers. So they're still fertilizers, they're adding fertility to the soil, but they're not coming from synthetic sources.
Where do they come from?
So when you think about farming, and if you go into Canadian Tire or somewhere and you say, what am I supposed to add to my veggie garden? Usually fertilizers coming in, it says NPK, and it'll have 3 numbers. So that's your nice nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. In organic farming, we focus on a lot more than that. We focus on micronutrients too. But for the most part, in organic farming, they're coming from animal sources. So manure is the main one, right? We use manure for a lot of our fertility, and that goes into building our compost. And other sources are feather meal, fish meal, bone meal, blood meal. So it's coming from naturally derived sources as opposed to synthetically produced.
And which ones do you guys
What do we use?
We use a little bit of feather meal.
We use a mix, We're a very small farm and we don't have a tractor, so making our own compost is quite difficult, and we're also too small to have animals on our land. So in our ideal farm system, we would have animals and we would be incorporating our own manure into the soil.
Is that the next step?
For us, I mean,
definitely.
we would like to have a much bigger piece of land where we can incorporate animals, because that's really sort of one of the main values in organic farming, is that you're cycling your nutrients.
Yeah.
So you're creating more of a closed loop. So rather than having a chemical plant producing your ammonium-based nitrogen fertilizers, and then you truck it into your farm from far away and use that on your farm, and in an ideal organic system, you're closing that loop. So I don't.
It's hard.
10 episodes.
I don't think they can hear that.
It's so hard.
When I get stoked, it's like
I'm doing
So wait,
very well.
I'm slapping the table. But my question is it harder to be an organic farmer? So why doesn't everybody just become an organic farmer?
Yeah.
Yeah, so all farming is difficult, and there wasn't malice behind the development of synthetic pesticides, synthetic fertilizers. Like it made sense in terms of production, is because farming is so hard. So scientists and farmers and politicians are working together, and hey, look, we can use this technological fix to make
it easier.
your lives easier. So
Make it more
so it's, I would say that all farming is hard,
Profit.
and it just organic farming is hard in a different way. Like it's difficult to manage as large amount of space using deep organic practices as it is to manage a large space conventionally. But at the same time, I think that a lot of people, and I didn't transition, I never started out as a conventional farmer, but I've heard conventional farmers who did transition say, well, in a lot of ways it actually made their lives easier being organic, because when you start focusing on, as John has highlighted so many times, when you start focusing on soil stewardship, the actual growing of plants can become easier when you start working with natural systems rather than
Focusing
trying to
just on the
solely
plant.
control them. And I mean, we're obviously in an organic system still trying to control things and complaining about the weather and
Of course,
doing
It's
all
hard.
of those farmer things, but in some ways I think it can become easier too once you're organic. It's a different system, and it's difficult to switch
There's a real
the way you're doing when you've been doing it that way, or your family's been doing that way for generations.
And there's a real neat sweet spot right in there too, because when we talk about like organic farming practices, they can be quite physically demanding, and that is going to incorporate more labor to your to your farm plan. So having limited resources, and by that I actually mean monetary. You have to. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so, I mean, like you guys really need to see. There's Ben Hartman, he has a farm in probably Vermont. So many farmers in Vermont. So he has clay bottom farm. But I mean, like, some of the farm gadgets that he's made just on the spot to make him and his wife's life a lot easier. Jean-Martin Fortier, like, some of the gadgets that he has around the farm to save his body and to save on labor. I mean, these are all things that kind of they get shared with the community of organic farmers, well, for all farmers for that matter. And, it's this great pool of knowledge that everybody that's growing something benefits from. Yeah. And so I think that's, just as important, is that there's in that farming community, and that can be a global community, there's a lot to be shared with ways to
make life easier, to
make life
easier.
Yeah, exactly. And make it
for
more
everybody,
to make it more viable, because we want to be able to do what we're doing for the rest of our lives, and not just to our own physical limitations, but within being able to provide a home and an education for hopefully potentially our own children someday. Like those are all questions that we have to answer as a couple, and as farmers, is like, is this farm plan, now going to work with, the resources that we have? Are we going to have to hire somebody and that kind of thing? So,
is there a movement to advocate and push organic farming to become the conventional way of farming? Or do you think eventually organic farming will become the conventional way of farming?
I know the UN definitely wants small scale organic farms to basically, they have it
take over.
Yeah, they have it in their mandate that small scale organic farms will quote unquote save the world just through organic farm practices. Now, before we go any further, I just think it's important that we say that with whether it's in conventional, whether it's in organic, there's always some people that also take advantage and try and get away with as little as possible. And so, there's bigger organizations that will, incorporate as much, approved herbicides and that kind of thing as they possibly can to save themselves on labor and profit and that kind of thing. But that's not in the mandate of every organic farm. That's not the driving factor for all farmers. It's not even the driving factor for conventional farms for that matter, right? I mean, it's just different farming practices, and it's just, we believe that being in synchronicity with the particular piece of land that we're given with and the community that we're in, that's the key to success and the key to providing a healthy environment going forward for everybody,
right?
And for everyone.
So with that in mind, in your mentality, in both of you guys' mentality, what would be the ideal scenario for your farm, for organic farming, for the community that you're in? What would be the ideal situation?
Yeah,
and are you guys close to it with the situation you guys are in now?
So I just want to back up for a second,
rewind.
just on the last question to add to what John's saying in terms of, you said, can we just shift to all organic farming and that'll be the...
It's hard.
Well, and it's fluid too, right? So the thing that I think I worry about a lot is within the way our economic system is structured, what John was touching on is things change. So what I mean by that is organic might mean something to small scale farmers like us.
Yeah.
But in a corporatized food system, it means something very different. And that's what I was sort of hinting at earlier when I said Canada versus the US. There are differences.
It's different.
Something that American organic farmers, smaller farmers, have been fighting against is the introduction of hydroponics into organic systems. So in the US now, hydroponic systems can be certified organic, and a hydroponic system, that means that you're not growing in the soil. And the whole time what we've been talking about in the tagline of US organics used to be build the soil, not feed the soil, not the plants.
Right.
They've now moved away from that in terms of you can have plants that never see natural sunlight, never touch soil, and that can be considered certified organic.
Do you believe in that?
No, I don't think that is
strongly no.
what I would consider a certified organic system. I think that the most important thing to me in terms of organics is protecting our farmland. And that's more important to me than the personal health benefits that I get by being an organic farmer. I mean, that's hugely important. There are so many things that are important, but number one, what I'm passionate about is our farmland and conserving the soil fertility that we do have. And we have a very small amount of land that is actually easily farmed. And so when we start introducing things like hydroponics, it's a huge, long discussion. I won't go totally into it, but we're getting away from what I believe is the base of what a sustainable regenerative food system is, which is
compost, because you wouldn't be able to have compost and then feed your hydroponic plants compost. What are you going to do with that compost?
Yeah, it's what we were talking about of a closed loop system, right? You're moving things inside with artificial lighting, with still quote unquote organically based food sources, so they can use organic fertilizer solutions rather than synthetic
it's not even
ones.
the natural sunlight.
But it's very different, right? And I'm not saying that all indoor food production is bad. I'm just saying that it's, in my mind, not the same as certified organic, where we have to focus on preserving farmland.
Is that just in the States?
Right now, in Canada, we don't have hydroponic under what is allowed under the Canadian organic regulations.
That leads from what you said, necessity, from the world, from farmers having the necessity to provide for people?
No, I think that came from corporate agriculture, shifting into
Yeah.
wanting to take a larger share of the organic market, and the same thing is happening in terms of the.
It's all about
It's
the money.
huge. It's so massive, and we can talk a lot about this politics, about farming politics.
Yeah, that's not.
But I want
That's
to
not why we're here, man.
No, I want to take a step back, and I wanna talk about your values with regards to your land. So you mentioned.
All right.
Yeah, so I think you said, what would be the ideal, and something that I think is really interesting to me is that there isn't one ideal structure for a farm. There's lots of models. There's great people doing things on YouTube, putting out books who are saying you should farm in this way. And really what it comes down to, if you're focused on a soil-based system, is an ideal farm is going to be something that works well with the environment that you're in, and so that's going to be different in different places. So there's no one
You're not
perfect
gonna produce
model.
strawberries in one place and then on the other.
Yeah, and there's lots of things that we can do to increase the availability. Like, we all want to have eggplants, even though we live on Vancouver Island. Well, maybe not everybody wants eggplants, but we all want hot peppers or something, right? So
Like moussaka
There's-
and like.
What's moussaka?
Moussaka is a Greek dish that is like almost entirely. It's basically like an eggplant pasta or an eggplant lasagna, basically. Yeah.
So they
Cheese,
so it's
tomato.
layered.
Hope has made that.
Oh, actually.
Yeah.
Oh man.
We made it
It's-
for Brody one
Yeah.
time.
It is
That's
fantastic.
probably why I like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, we
But
made it
it's
for your
hard.
wedding.
Oh, for my wedding, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
that's
We
what
made
we
it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
But so it's hard. So you have to choose your battles. You have to choose the produce that you produce in your farm, and you can't produce anything more.
Yeah,
Is
you
that
have
based
to-
on the weather or the soil that you have?
yeah, and there's things that you can manipulate around that. You can do things to change your soil chemical balance. You can do things like building greenhouses to increase heat and microclimates. There's lots of things that we can do to manipulate our system, and that can be in passive ways. We have hoop houses that we don't heat, but that still changes what we're able to grow early.
Yeah.
Like we're in April right now, so we've got a lot more food coming out of the greenhouses than we do coming out of the ground. But yeah, it's going to vary wherever you are in the world, and that's why there's just so many systems that can be regenerative and it can be organic and that can be sustainable. There's not a one size fits all model.
Yeah, exactly.
For people.
Yeah.
The figure is 6% of the world's soil land is arable. It is farmable.
Yeah.
Less than 0.1% of that is class 1 soil. And here on Vancouver Island, we have more of class 2, 3, 4, and 5. Richmond is a perfect example of class 1 soil.
So that's the prime.
That's like the
Prime
prime stuff.
soil too.
Yeah. But like for our thing in particular, like we're looking at like 3 to 5 acres. That's manageable for us. On Vancouver Island, more than likely we're going to be working with rock at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's not to say that can't be worked with, right? And I mean, so there's just ways of looking at your land, and I mean, it's not just organic agriculture or conventional agriculture that look at land this way. Like permaculture is based around
Permaculture, I've heard so much about that.
Yeah, it's like that's a way of like looking at your land and how you and your land can work together to produce food and take care of your family and whatnot. But Vancouver Island, 3 to 5 acres. We want to do veggies and berries. We do want to range I know chickens for sure. I love chickens. They're like some of my favorite creatures on the planet.
Yeah,
they're
so cute.
so cute. Yeah, absolutely.
Are you vegetarian?
I was a vegan actually for 2 years.
Right on.
Erin was vegan for.
I wasn't vegan for very long, but yeah, I was vegetarian for most of my adult life, but I'm not.
How long have you been vegan?
3 years.
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah. So again, that gets into food politics.
Yeah, food politics.
Very-
We don't want to talk about it.
No, we all need to be
I
talking.
am interested about it,
Yeah.
but I'm interested more about you guys.
Yeah, so for us, I mean, as we when we talked about all of the sources of where our nutrient inputs are coming from,
We're meant
it's
to.
not vegan, you
Yeah.
know? It's all based on incorporating animals into the system, and that was what moved me back to eating meat, which I hadn't from 18 until I was in my 30s, was farming and really having that strong connection of how I want to farm my vegetables, even though I don't raise animals. In the wider aspect, we have a lot of farm
They
friends.
take part of the ecosystem.
They're an integral part of
Yeah.
the system for a more regenerative system.
If you look at what any farmer does, they're basically that parcel of land is playing the exact same scenario if there was no crops there. So you'd have predators, chasing each other, eating each other, things decomposing on that, piece of property. And so you have all sorts of trees and shrubs and plants and stuff that grow off of that as farmers. Like it's our mandate to be able to reproduce that. And so if we're going, it's just some of the crops we grow have, more particular concentrated needs of some of these things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's what John was talking about too, in terms of the amount of land that we can actually grow crops on. I hear the argument a lot of, well, if we just got rid of all of the animals, then we could just grow
what do you think
vegetables
about
on
that?
all that space.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't. It's different land.
There's a reason there's only, from the research I've done, there's only, when I say a handful, you got to think about how many thousands of farms there, small scale farms there are in the world. I can only find a handful, and I mean less than 10 that are farming as more of like a non-animal based farm.
Yeah.
It's
Organically farming. So many conventional farms
okay.
are, right?
So what plays in it, like animals, what do they do? What do they
So
provide? Like you mentioned the feces and...
Right, so the manure is providing the nutrient cycling, and it depends on the type of animal. But for example, what grass-fed cows are doing is they're ranging on grasslands, and a lot of times that's rocky hillsides, outcropped areas that you couldn't crop for vegetables. Vegetables are very finicky, especially, annual crops are very finicky in terms of what they need. So they're ranging areas that are not irrigated sometimes, that are drier, that's grass. So that's something that we as humans can't digest. So what animals are doing, ruminants are doing, cows, are taking an indigestible material in an area that we can't grow food, and they're turning it into a super high quality protein for us. So coming from a human perspective, that's something that we can't use, grass, and then all of a sudden we have cattle that we can. Right. And then at the same time, they're reducing the insect pressures and the pest pressures when you're ranging animals over land. They're dropping manure everywhere, and when they're doing that, they're providing fertility not only for us to take as manure for our compost or for our food systems, but onto those grasslands. So when their cows are coming through, they're ranging down, they're cutting down grass. Grass has evolved over time in concert with animals. It likes being, that's why we mow our grass. It likes being mowed down, and then it regenerates. The manure that they're dropping is making the soil really healthy for those grasses to grow. And it's not usually just one kind of grass in a savanna, in a grassland system. It's a multitude. Those are all being fed and feeding mycorrhizae and all of the soil biology in the soil. And I lost my train of thought for a second, what I was saying.
I like how stoked you
And
are.
so then when the grass is regrowing, and this is where it gets very political, because a lot of discussion now around diets is not so much around animal ethics, and the reason I became vegetarian was animal welfare and animal ethics.
Right.
Now a lot of the discussion is around greenhouse gas emissions, but actually grass pasture land is a huge carbon sink. So when the grasses are constantly being mowed down by cows and by cattle that's ranging, and then they're regrowing, that's sucking
a lot
more
of
carbon out of the atmosphere than our forests are, because it's happening continually in a regenerative
Mm-hmm.
process. So grass-fed cattle is actually not this huge contributor in my mind, and in the research that I've done to greenhouse gas emissions,
That's very
that
interesting.
we posit it. And so animals are an essential part of the system, and then people will say, well, why can't we why can't we just have all the animals live out their happy lives, and we just use them for manure and we never eat them? It's like, well, who's going to do that? Or is it the farmer's responsibility to feed and raise all of these animals with no input back to them? I mean, it becomes a question of economics, right?
So,
We're not talking about like a factory farm setting. We're talking
about grass. I think a lot of times, because this was the choice for a long time, we come down to is there's these all horrible feedlot conventional animal systems, or there's vegetarianism and veganism, and that's where my food path started. But those aren't the only options, and as an organic farmer, I can't ethically say that I would be a real vegan or vegetarian because I'm going to kill bugs on my farm. I'm going to use manure. I'm going to use fish bone meal. Like I'm using all these things to grow my system because I'm choosing
It's a whole ecosystem.
that is still much more sustainable than a conventional
I see.
farm system
Yeah.
where I'm using natural gas to synthetically produce ammonium for my nitrogen fertilizers, and I'm mining all of my phosphorus, which is a non-renewable resource. So it gets very complicated, and there's no, again, it's like farming systems, there's no one right way to have an ethical diet. It's different for everybody, and it comes down to personal belief. But for me having, and for John having animals as part of that system is important to us, and that includes eating.
And
that's on that personal level issue that Erin was talking about as well. That doesn't just give us the green light to go ahead and just be like, great, we can eat whatever meat we want. Like that is not it at all.
No,
we were
of
vegetarians
course,
and vegans for particular reasons, and we still respect those reasons. Like I'm just finding out actually, like in the last couple of weeks, that I'm actually lactose intolerant. I was when I was a child, but I don't. The dairy industry is something that is a nightmare for me. I won't go. I won't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
It's pretty brutal.
Once you've toured some even organic dairies, like it's a pretty scary scene. I mean, and that's not all producers. Like it would be important that it's not all producers, especially not small scale producers.
However, the majority,
when things get corporatized,
a lot of unethical shit going on.
I think that's the main issue is corporations that take advantage of certain resources, including animals.
Yes.
And so I strongly believe that organizations and local organizations and local farms that actually live in symbiosis with all of these resources, including animals, I am 100% fine with that because it's feeding the community.
And
you have the opportunity when it's local to actually talk to those people.
Exactly.
Right? There's not this chain of the people making the decisions are not necessarily the people feeding or having to slaughter the animals. And
exactly,
it's more connected. You can hear and listen to the values and see the values.
You can hear a reasoning behind everything, like you just gave me the reasoning.
See the product of your values.
Yeah.
And taste it and eat it. And compared to, you go to a store and you buy something that's not organic and it's from California or organic, and you have no idea where it's actually coming from. It has a sticker on it that says certified organic,
but you have no idea.
Don't know the environment that it was grown in. Really, you don't know who grew it. Really, instead of if you go to a market and we see you guys and it's organic farmers, you can talk to you and you can actually tell us, and it's that sense of community.
And you get lots of different answers too, right? Because each farmer is going to have a different stance on something too. There's again not one right way of doing things.
And Erin touched on it before too. Is the organic standards, like especially in Canada, they're very, very rigid on animal. On the treatment of animals, and they actually supersede SPCA standards as well.
That's awesome.
In Canada, anyway.
But they're still not as good as the French standards.
Is that the best standards, the French standards?
That's sort of for chickens,
Like on that market level, though. I mean, the farmers market level. Like if you go to the Moss Street Farmers Market, if you go to one of my favorite markets, the Qualicum Beach Farmers Market, any producer that is selling meat in some form, they have stories, they have pictures, they have, they want you to engage with them. They want to be able to demonstrate why those animals are so important to them, why it's so important to their family, why it's so important to the community, why it's so important to that piece of land. And I'm not making that up. It's every single, I can see every single stand in my mind, and they all have stories. And they want you to be able to
and they're
ask
very
those questions.
transparent with those stories, unlike big corporate companies that just put on the shelves. They just want you to buy it.
Yeah.
And if they are transparent,
there's not going to be a marker, a farmer standing next to each vegetable at a grocery store, right? Telling you the story, so you don't really know. You just assume that it's okay.
You hope that if they can be transparent because they have nothing to hide, right? And that's not to say that just because we're very strong advocates for the certified organic system, that you can't go to any of these markets and find great growers who who you can talk to directly and have that relationship who aren't certified organic. Because, for example, here we don't really have any certified organic meat because the meat regulations are for, again, because of practical reasons, the way things evolved, are a lot more stringent around health and safety. So it actually has made it really difficult for small scale producers to have certified organic meat because of the slaughterhouse and the abattoir regulations. So that's an example of where food policy has actually really sort of negatively impacted our small producers. But so you can't necessarily find certified organic meat on the island. But that doesn't mean that you
because the standards are so high.
Because we don't have certified slaughterhouses on the island. We have a lot of small abattoirs and processing facilities, so people who raise their meat organically can't sell it as organic.
Now I have a personal question.
Absolutely.
Yes.
If you guys don't mind. So
Bring it on.
what I'm very interested to see is your ideology or your beliefs behind the scale of what you are producing. So what you are producing right now is a certain scale where you're feeding, and so you go into farmers markets and you're selling your produce. What would be the ideal scale of your farmland? Would you want to grow, and why would you want to grow? Is it all economical? Do you care more? Bigger? Get bigger or produce?
And I gotta
reach out to more
something
people
onto that question. And right now, what is the most important component to your farm?
Okay.
And if there's one or three, what's the most component? What's the most important component to the structure of your farm?
And I also want to add that I want to know if the economic value that you get from all these foods is important to you. Do you care how much money you're getting, or do you want to? When is the happy state of what you want to reach?
We care how much money we're getting.
Well, of course.
You have to.
Because we're running a business.
I think that's
Vancouver
a
Island.
great question, Manuel. I mean, I think that as small scale farmers, in the community of small scale farmers, we're all asking ourselves that question. That's the most important question.
So I'll give some context first. So right now we're farming just under 1 acre. That's the amount of space that we have, and within that we're just doing vegetables, and the previous farmer Sean from North Star Organics had put in quite a few berry plants too. So we are farming that in terms of scale. It's size and intensity is kind of how I would define scale. So we're small scale and relatively intensive. So that means that we are doing a lot of succession planting. So we're planting crops right after each other. If we finish with one crop, we harvest it, it's out. We plant something else. And so there's different models of doing things. So I would consider us more of a bio-intensive model, and that's what you see a lot of information about nowadays. Like John mentioned, Clay Bottom Farm with Ben Hartman and his lean farming system, and Jean-Martin Fortier, and then there's also bio-extensive farming. So in terms of where we would like to get to in the future and how big we would like to be, we, as John said, would like to be in sort of like the 5 acre range. That's not necessarily so that we can grow that much more in terms of actual pounds yields of vegetables. We would like to grow our business to the point where it supports both of us full-time, because right now it's just me full-time, and then John is still working as a carpenter full-time. Not that he doesn't love doing that. He has 2 strong passions, and then spends the rest of the time on the farm. And then we have 1 part-time employee who functions more like an average full-time employee because she's so skilled. Our friend Nadia, who will be farming with us this year. And so ideally, we would like to scale up in terms of having full-time work for both of us. And I go back and forth on it because it's nice to keep a business small and manageable, and that's really our aspiration, is for our own household economics to be sustainable. But at the same time, being a young woman business owner, I also would like to be able to provide good jobs for other people, especially young women farmers.
I see.
In the community. So that's kind of a balancing act of, how big do we want to get? We want to be able to have staff for that aspect, also just for the sustainability aspect for ourselves. If you've got a business that runs entirely off 2 people, and we've worked for many farms like this, you don't have the opportunity to get sick. If your marketing is every weekend at the farmer's market, you can't miss a farmer's market if you have the flu. Too bad, So that's difficult, I think, for all farms, is to find that balance of what's sustainable financially. And our goal with increasing the land that we would like to use, the scale in terms of the actual land acreage, is, in my mind, the more acreage that small-scale organic farmers can be stewarding, the better. So we would like to have more land to manage, not just so that we can produce a lot more vegetables, but so that we can manage our vegetables a little bit differently than we do now. And I think that's a goal for a lot. There's a lot of farm models out there. If people are really into farming, then they probably know who, Never Sink Farm is a good example, where they've really scaled down their operation in terms of size. I think that they're down below an acre now for doing a really intensive, really well-run system. We're following more in DeLisa's footsteps and the footsteps of some other farmers we've worked for. Square Root Farm, Crystal and Ilya, have the same sort of goals as we have, of expanding the land so that you can manage it differently, which means that you have more areas that can be cover cropped and rested, areas that are managed with animals so that your nutrient cycling loop is more closed. So
less intensive.
Yeah, so we want to, of course, be able to make money, because that's the reality of, as I already said, we live in an extremely expensive part of the world.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm very stubborn and I don't want to leave. My family is from here. I want to stay on the island.
And land values just
land values are out of control.
Out of control.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's also, this is actually a good segue to insert the Young Agrarians too. I mean, there's a really great movement, an organization on the island called the Young Agrarians, and they're not
Young
just...
what, sorry?
The Young Agrarians.
Agrarians, yeah.
So they're not just on the island now. I mean, they're in BC, and now they've moved into Alberta, and so what the Young Agrarians started out as is a land linking organization that would link up some of the new farmers and aspiring farmers with some of the older farmers, to not just exchange knowledge, but to actually exchange land, because a lot of those old farmers that have been stewarding that land for so long, they don't want to just sell it off and it become a winery or just become some mega mansion. They, like us, had those goals of making that parcel better, and they want to hand that off to people that are going to take the same care. So Young Agrarians is basically facilitating that link. And so they have workshops, or they host workshops on getting those, 2 minds together, and those, and they also do workshops and for farmers or for new farmers on how to better take care of your land, how to raise, like Alberta right now is how to raise grass-fed beef, and the benefits of what ranging cattle in Alberta can have to a no-till system kind of thing. They're a really important aspect of the community that we live on too. So
in order to protect the industry,
in order to protect the farmland, for sure, and that's and in order to protect our food security, and that's so important to to us being here. And I mean, with those rising land prices, an organization like the Young Agrarians is crucial to to having those opportunities come up. And Aisha, she works at the forefront of getting those 2 people together, the older and the newer farmers. And so when those opportunities for land come up, I mean, you can get up on an alert system. You're on the mailing list, so you see she sends out that those opportunities on almost like a daily to weekly basis. And so it might not be a buying scenario, but it could very well be a long-term lease scenario, which is huge,
massive,
because that's more of the way that things are going for food production on Vancouver Island, is basically, anyone that wants to buy a farm has basically profited from having $1 to $2 million worth of a sale from their house on the mainland and is buying, you know, a 5-acre parcel for that much money here.
Yeah.
So, for farmers like us that, you know, we don't have that kind of capital and probably never really will, leasing is more of a scenario for us. So if we're going to buy a property, like we've looked up island and, you know, that's one of those changes that's kind of had to happen to the farm plan is like we wanted to buy a farm. Maybe it's not going to look like that. Maybe we're going to have like a small house, you know, on a small lot close to a farm that we can lease someday. There's lots of farmers that are actually doing that these days. So we just kind of have to adapt with the times, and that's just how we're going to try and make it work.
And people should go and buy from people like you. Right?
I think
we need, as a community, we need to support this and buy into this in order to protect that industry, because it's really important at a bigger scale than just Vancouver Island, because our world is fucking fragile right now. And that's the thing, like I'm not gonna stand here and like slander grocery stores, because we go to grocery stores too. Everybody does. It's that's how, you know, we've kind of evolved as, you know, these North Americans. Like I can only speak for, like, you know, BC right now. Like we're busy. We're all busy people. We're all trying to, you know, pay the rent and that kind of thing. And but I think it is important that we all do make the effort to go to the market on a Saturday.
It makes me so happy going to market.
That's the
like
thing.
I go in and I talk to so many people, and I see you guys, and I buy your beautiful vegetables and
some of
everything, and it's
one
so
of the
awesome.
biggest things that I hear, like from people that don't go to the market, because I I get asked that quite a bit. Like, so what do you do for a living? Like I'm a carpenter, and I have I help my partner out on the side, like running a farm. Oh yeah, like I don't have time to go to the farmer's market. It's like, I don't have time to go to the farmer's market. You don't have time to, like, you know, wake up on a Saturday morning and have a leisurely cup of coffee and go like down to take a breath of fresh air and maybe buy some nice produce and support your local farmer.
Talk to amazing people.
They're just lazy.
That is not just an investment in your own stress levels and your own health, and that's an investment in your community and your future, right? Like,
and we need to question that, is that, you know, as John said, a lot of it is that we're really busy, and if people don't have time, and I do think that that's legitimate, then what are we as a society saying? Like, why does everybody have to have a full-time job and then have 2 or 3 quote-unquote, you know, millennial side hustles on top of that? Is that a system that we want to build, where everybody is overworked and doesn't have the time to contribute to the community? So we not only need to make food available, we need to make it accessible at a deeper level too, and that's for us, part of that is being supported by awesome small grocers that are open the rest of the week for the people who are working on Saturday or don't live in, you know, close to Fairfield, don't have a car. Is working with small grocers too. So we've got some fabulous small grocers in Victoria that buy our produce from us, and that makes it that much more accessible, right? If it's available 7 days a week.
Exactly, then it will be better. Exactly. That's what Hope and I run into trouble. Going to the farmers market only once a week, Monsters Market. And that's it. And then we have to go to the supermarket for the rest, you know?
Yeah, and that's part of, you know, people are in a good way living in smaller homes, hopefully, but, you know, if you're living in a small apartment, you don't necessarily have the capacity to buy your entire week's worth of groceries for your whole family.
We would love to do that.
So there's things that need to happen to make food more accessible, and that's not just up to farmers, and that's not just up to eaters and customers. These are, like, you know, wider society and policy decisions that we have to be making.
I want to talk about your day in a life.
Okay.
So in a normal farmer's life, what do you do when you wake up all the way down to where you put your head?
At what time do you do all these things?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on every farm, and I don't want to. I know, but I'm going to make a political statement first, because I am
Politics.
Political science student. This is my background, and one day I will be a politician.
I'll vote for you.
I'll vote for you too.
I also don't want to glorify busyness, and I know we all put a lot of, especially as farmers, we put a lot of our self-worth is around our productivity and how much we literally, that's how we make our money, is how much we can literally produce. That's our productivity. I think that the more farmers I talk to who have been doing this for a long time, the people that we should all be learning from, they're not going to say, yeah, I work 14 hours a day and I love it. They're going to be like, I used to work 14 hours a day. It's crazy. Try and build a sustainable business where you don't have to do that. So we're still in the early stages where, we work a lot. And a lot of farmers that we know who are amazing farmers thrive on that kind of system. But a lot of us want to have farming be something that can be a more normal schedule so that we can do other things that we love to do in our life. And it's not
like
just
go for a freaking bike ride.
We're consumed by the farm, right? Yeah. So I'm just going to put that out there first before I explain my day. Is like, even if I say that I work 12 hours, I don't want to glorify that. And then that be the end goal of like, somehow I'm a good farmer because I worked that hard. It's like, well, maybe I need to do more on my business so that I don't have to do that.
Exactly. It's tricky,
Yeah, it's about, and I love doing it, but I'm also relatively young compared to a lot of farmers. I don't want to be doing that when I'm in my 50s.
Exactly.
Right? That's not
it gets hard. It gets your body takes a toll, and that's where I'm just gonna put a little hint into there. Do you guys do volunteering work? Can people help you out? Would you be interested in that? Maybe that will alleviate some time.
Yeah, so we get asked that question a lot, and we love it because it means that people want to be engaged. When you're a small farm and you don't have capacity, like for the most part it's just me on the farm. Yeah, it's difficult to take on volunteers unless they're going to be able to to commit time, which is also a huge ask in our current society, where a lot of the people who want to do that are young people, and they have to pay their rent too. So we don't generally take volunteers just because it's difficult for us to manage. Yeah, right. Exactly. Like the farm Haliburton used to have more volunteer capacity, and a lot of farms used to take woofers and things too, but it's just difficult to manage when you're training new people all the time. It becomes this nasty cycle of like, well, I could just do it a lot faster myself. Yeah, right. So for us, the goal is more to build our capacity so that we can hire staff and pay them a fair wage, and so that they're people that are building their own skills and either want to work a long time on our farm or want to start their own farm. I mean, ideally, we always want to find people who want to work for a long time and build the capacity within an organization. But so we would love to take volunteers more than we currently can.
We do take volunteers from the Claremont High School. Yes. They have a wicked program with their high school kids where every Wednesday they'll come over to Haliburton, and they'll help out each farming entity, or they've got enough students that want to be part of this program. And so there's different tasks that like Erin can take 20 minutes to set aside, and it's something that will obviously, like with most farm routine, like be somewhat repetitive. Yeah. But that being said, like these students they can take ownership on this task, and like they're left to their kind of own device for the next couple of hours, and Erin will come back and check on them.
And they're used to the farm because they're there every other week. Yeah. So they know what to do. Yeah. So it's different. There's different volunteer capacity that we have in terms of management. We have one volunteer who comes and he's our only volunteer other than our friends and family. My mom's a volunteer when she comes over from the mainland. But we do have one volunteer. His name is Brian, and he comes every Friday and helps me. But he's there every week. So nice. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. He does it without needing my leadership on a lot of stuff. So that's when it really helps, is if there's somebody who is going to be there regularly, which is again is difficult for people to make that kind of commitment to volunteering. It's great if they can, but it's not something that we would complain that we don't get enough people who want to volunteer their time every single week to help us grow our business. We're highly, what do you say, highly intensive or like moderately? We're relatively intensive. So I mean, like we do have a very super structured schedule that we follow every single day, and like Erin being on the farm full time, like she knows exactly what that is, and so when I come to the farm right after work, she knows exactly what task I need to go, and luckily, like I have the background and I know what her expectation is.
without question, I'll go and do it because I know exactly what that is. That took time and training, and it's taken every weekend that we've had together to be on the farm together to learn exactly what she wants and to learn what those needs are. She's also given the perennial berry management to me, so that's up to me to organize. And yeah, it's just kind of within that. She was talking a lot about the time that it takes to train someone to do that properly, because there's also those other things to consider, soil health and whatnot that can kind of be compromised sometimes. And that's no fault. That's nothing we get mad at. We love the fact that we have so many people that want to come and help us. Hopefully one day we'll be able to, actually it's not hopefully, that's part of our plan one day, is to be able to facilitate having if we're able to scale up to 3 to 5 acres, is to be able to take school groups, is to be able to have children engage with our farm, because it's something we're both really passionate about.
Or like Erin said, hire a permanent employee.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. And that'll be critical to making the business sustainable as well as,
and your growth.
Yeah. But yeah, we definitely do want to have an educational aspect of our farm too, and that is gonna require more space as well, and more time. And if we want to be able to devote time to groups like that, then we do have to increase our labor pool and that kind of thing. So it's
It'll
all
come with time.
Yeah,
Time will tell.
It's all kind of evolving. With
Exactly.
So let's do
to
it.
get back to your original question,
Yeah.
you can cut all of that out. I wake up, I go to the farm.
What time is this?
You
it
slave for
depends.
12 hours.
Yeah, I'm one of those people who functions a heck of a lot better if I get 8.5 to 9 hours worth of sleep. That's just, John can function perfectly well off 6.5, 7 hours.
Okay.
I'm not one of those people. So really, because we're a small farm and because of the way that we market, we do the farmers market, but we also do a fair bit of wholesale to a bunch of wonderful restaurants and the small scale grocers.
Awesome.
And then this year we're also doing our own community supported agriculture system, so a weekly food box. So because of that, we're actually harvesting a lot. So usually the first thing that I'm doing at the farm after we've opened up the greenhouses and done watering and just a general checking the vole traps is John's job, is harvesting, because we want to get food out of the field as early as possible in the day when it's still cool. So that's really where our day starts, is in the greenhouses, especially I'm thinking more this time of year because we're in April right now. And then harvesting. And then because I work by myself for the most part, it's kind of a whole mixed bag of what I'm doing, because I'm kind of doing everything. But most of it is I'm seeding stuff, I'm planting stuff, I'm weeding stuff, I'm harvesting, and I'm repeating, or marketing and then repeating. And that's, really the cycle that I'm going through. Not necessarily, and it kind of goes backwards in the order. I'm harvesting during the day, and then maybe I'm weeding, and then maybe I'm transplanting late in the afternoon or in the evening and seeding. But that's really what I'm spending the time doing, is preparing beds to be planted, planting things, managing those things to have them grow to their fullest capacity that I can, and then marketing them. So
that's full on.
Yeah, and that's really what small scale farms is the marketing becomes a big part, because you're selling your stuff directly for the most part. So we're very lucky in the system that we're in to be a collective, and so we have, for our wholesale system, we have 2 people who manage that, and we just send a list of the food that we have available that week, and they send it out to all the chefs. They coordinate all of the orders. They come to the farm and pick it up. And this is the 2 people who do this used to be farmers at Haliburton, so they understand exactly our system. They have farmed before us on this land, and then they distribute the food to all of the chefs, the restaurants and the stores that we work with.
What produce do you grow the most of?
Yeah, because we're a small farm, it's relatively mixed in terms of actual...
And with seasons too.
Yeah, so we farm year round as much as we can without heat. I mean, we had a lot of snow this past February, so that limited it somewhat. But we market from... Last week was sort of our first week back at full market, but let's say we roughly market from April through mid-January. So there's really only a couple of months that we're not at Moss Street Market. In terms of actual volume, we grow a lot of salad mix. That's pretty common on
lot of turnips.
small farms.
A lot of salad.
We grow a lot of
salad turnips.
A lot of carrots. That's a big seller for us is our carrots. We
They're
have
awesome.
some very dedicated customers who really love our carrots.
Manuel is one of those customers.
Yep.
People love carrots. Can't go wrong with carrots. And then we grow a diversity of things. We have no Asian heritage whatsoever, but we
grow a lot of
Japanese
vegetables.
Japanese, Korean, Chinese, Taiwanese vegetables. That's really
cool.
what we're very into.
Nice.
Yeah, so our favorite is Japanese salad turnips and Korean daikon style radish. So mu is Korean radish, and pak choi, bok choy.
Bok choy.
Yeah, really. I think
Bok choy is so pretty.
they're one of our favorites.
She selects every single, every single crop, like based on kind of like how we can, like how it's going to look, like as a final product on that market stand, and she does such a good job.
I think a lot of it was when I started out at UBC Farm. After I did the program, I worked there for a year, and then I worked as with DeLisa as the brassica field manager. So the brassicas is most of those crops. So it's a lot of the arugula, mustard greens, pak choi, kale, cauliflower, broccoli. We don't grow cauliflower or broccoli because we have a very small piece of land. But the salad turnips, the radishes, those are all part of that family. And that was the field that I managed. So I think a lot of it comes from that. But it's also just our climate. Like the West Coast is brassica land, and it's such a diverse family of plants. Like there's just a huge diversity of different crops out of that one small family. Whereas if you think of other plant families, like the legume family, I mean, we really mostly grow peas and beans. Like there's differences within that, but there's not the variety.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so we do grow squashes. A lot of small scale farms don't grow winter squash because it takes up a huge amount of space and you don't get a lot of money for it. But for us, it actually works quite well because we do have an acre that we manage very intensively. Doing the winter squashes is a little bit of a breather crop. So we put them in, and we don't have to do a lot of. They take up a lot of space, but we don't have to do a lot of labor with them. And then we have a crop at the end. So it's something that we can produce without having to do a lot of management, which is also important to us. If you have other small farms, they would say, that's ridiculous. They're not a financially smart crop to do because they take up so much land for so little return. I love your squashes.
They're the best.
Oh, thank you. It is one of those keys to being able to live and eat seasonally as well, because it's the winter squash is essentially a storage crop. And when we first moved to Victoria and checked out the Moss Street Farmers Market as just customers, I was like, wow, like we went in December, and I was shocked, like there was barely any squash there.
Interesting.
And we had just come from working from a farm in the Okanagan where one of our main staples of that we were bringing to the Vancouver Farmers Market was storage crops, so onions and squash and that kind of thing. We're like, wow, this is definitely an opportunity to incorporate in the farm plan.
There's a niche to fill.
There's a niche to fill, absolutely, because people do want to be able to eat throughout the winter time and eat vegetables throughout the winter, and we can kind of facilitate that.
Yeah, and it comes down to like a lot of farmers do grow that stuff, but we all kind of grow it in small quantities because people have small amounts of land. So that's where it comes into wanting to have a bigger piece of land, is to be able to do more of those crops. And we've always wanted to be a little bit more focused on winter production. Again, because that's sort of something that people assume is really easy to do on the island because it's such mild temperature. So I've gone to the winter's market before as a customer when I haven't been selling there, and heard people it's ridiculous that there isn't more food available. This is Victoria, and they kind of assume that all the farmers are lazy. It's like, well, no.
Why'd you go farm?
We're farming in basically a rainforest, you can't work the soil when it's rainy, and a lot of it actually comes down to the amount of sunlight more than the temperature. The ability to grow through the winter. So you can have relatively mild temperatures, but if you have no sunlight, stuff's not growing. So it's not that farmers on the island are lazy, it's that they're dealing with small farms, pieces of land with not a lot of storage space for a lot of storage crops, and not a lot of growing space for the crops that take up a lot of space, like potatoes and squashes.
Potatoes do take a lot of space.
Yeah, and they're in the ground for not a super long amount of time, but they take up space to have enough bulk to supply you for months and months. You got to grow a lot of potatoes.
So one question that I wanted to ask before you guys leave, because I know you guys just getting to it.
We have to,
he's got to skedaddle pretty quick. But so as someone who wants to farm, and I have at my house right now, I've put a tarp over our front yard for the last year and a half, and it's ready to be attended to. Where do I start?
So was it over like a lawn?
Yeah, it was over a lawn. And so now we put soil down as well, and then we just completely tarped it.
Okay.
So
you put some topsoil on top of your grass?
Well, we dug up all the grass, put topsoil up, and then just tarped it.
Okay.
So now what should I do? How do I start? Where do I go?
Yeah, it depends on what your goals are for doing that. Is it that you want to learn to be a farmer and have a farm someday, or you want to grow some of your own food?
I want to grow my own food.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So
And this comes with me too, because Hope and I, we want to buy a piece of land and want to start growing.
And I totally commend you guys, because this is the thing that I grew up with in my neighborhood, was people like yourselves that had, a backyard or whatnot that they could devote to supplementing their groceries with things that they produce themselves. And I think it's very important.
yeah. So I would make a decision about, do you want to grow a fair bit of food for yourself? Like, is it to help reduce your grocery costs so that you can get more access to super fresh food? Or is it that you want to focus more on the learning aspect?
All the above.
Yeah, so if you want to help supplement what you're eating a lot of, then obviously choose something that you're eating a lot of.
Right.
Salad greens is what I usually recommend to people, because that's something that you can go out and pick and it's going to be super fresh. And it's something that you can grow relatively quickly. So if you mess it up the first time or you get slugs or something, you've got a chance to start over. Whereas if you want to grow a bunch of beautiful winter squashes, that's going to take you the whole season before you get something. It's going to take you a lot of space. So yeah, I would start with salad greens if you like having salad.
Something
That's
easy,
usually
simple.
that, and I think sometimes it's a little bit hard in our climate, but having cherry tomatoes is kind of a gateway thing for a lot of people too, because they just taste so much different than what you're going to get at the grocery store, because they're being picked when they're vine ripened.
Right. So what kind of soil should I go use for topsoil?
Yeah,
Is
I mean,
there
it
a
depends.
supplier that you guys use specifically?
Well, we don't. I mean, we're building up the soil that is there with added nutrients, so we don't bring in topsoil. But yeah, I mean, you can, if you're doing it in a yard sale, really you can talk to we use a farm supplier, but even if you go to Garden Works or something, then they've got
Ask for
compost there, and you
organic
can talk to
Compost,
people.
sea soil is really good
soil, like
Yeah.
SEA soil?
SEA, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, sea soil.
Yeah, so that's composted fish and forest wastes.
Yeah.
So the way that you're going to get the most out of it, I think, is if you grow food that you like to eat, because you're just going to be that much more motivated to actually go out and look after it.
Right.
And see how
Sustain
it
it,
grows. And you
grow
might
it.
decide, oh, I really love eating that, but I hate growing it. So I'm actually going to buy that at the farmer's market and I'm going to try growing something else, right? You might really love growing, I don't know. You might really like eating
Carrots, peas.
You might really like
peas.
eating.
So what we
peas.
bought is this
People
big
usually love
kinda
growing peas, though.
frame.
That's
It's
a
like a
fun one.
10-foot frame. We're gonna grow peas.
Like
pea vine.
pea trellis.
Pea trellis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so it's also a question of time and management and what you can devote to it too. I think the easiest way to kind of relate something like growing food in your own yard is to use an example. My next door neighbor, Bruce and Pierrico. They both worked full time. But they spent, basically their Saturday and their Sunday kind of tending to their vegetable garden. So in a situation, their backyard was about 30 feet by 30 feet. They had a couple rows of carrots. They had a row of peas. They had a row of beans. And this was all kind of divided into two. So I'd say like there was one 15-foot row and another 15-foot row, and or 15-foot space, 15-foot space, and then an alley that went between them, and then separate alleys for each crop. And so they grew what they were going to eat, and so they knew they wanted fresh carrots. They knew they wanted fresh beans. They had fresh peas. They knew that they wanted to have berries, so they planted a couple rows of blueberries. And then in the summertime, like they were transplanting out cherry tomatoes and cucumbers.
Cool.
And so it was enough for them to manage themselves. And if you want particular information on those crops and their needs, soil needs, you can go and check out like Johnny's West Coast Seeds, like all these guys, High Mowing, like they all have, these are the seed suppliers, and they all have excellent information on specific crops and what they look like what, you know, maybe you want green beans, maybe you want yellow beans, maybe you want beans that look like, you know, they're purple and white at the same time. Like it all comes down to what kind of tickles your fancy and what you want to grow. And you know, it's, oh man, growing vegetables like on your own,
you
is
go so
something.
many directions with
There's
it.
so many directions, and it just, you know,
It's a lot of experimentation, trial and error.
any which way you do it, you benefit in some form from.
What are, in your guys' opinion, what are the resources that you guys use the most for people out there?
Yeah, so I mean, the first one is people. So the main
farmers.
way that we have learned has been by working for other farmers, and that's been really important to us. Because who better to learn from? I mean, some people, we obviously started with a more formal, starting at UBC Farm, we started with a more formal course, which was awesome because that gave us more of the foundational knowledge, and I have a long academic background and come from family background, so that works really well for me as a more academic setting, and a little bit more interest in like the science behind things, because then that provides a base. And it's not to say that I farm perfectly following all of the most perfect sustainable systems. That's something I always aspire to, but having that as a base, some sort of educational base, is awesome. That doesn't work for everybody, but for me that's when I was then working on other farms, gave me the ability to analyze what I was doing, and would I do this way, or would I do it another way? Yeah, for us, learning from other farmers was the number one way that we learned, and I think that is so valuable. We're not out to recreate the wheel, but it gives us an opportunity to be creative when we've seen a bunch of different systems. We've worked at a lot of farms, then it's not just like, oh, you know, I read this way, so I'm going to do it this way.
Yeah, exactly.
We've seen, you know, our bosses Kevin and Anna Marie do something, we've seen Chris and Lilia do something, we've seen Sean do something, we've seen DeLisa do something, and then our farming becomes a melding of what makes sense to us from all of these other systems. And realistically, if you want to farm for a living, we didn't have the capacity to just get a piece of land, spend tens of thousands of dollars on inputs and start farming. Like our professional development meant that we had to be paid a wage to learn, which is awesome. I mean, working for farms is hard work, and it's not usually high pay, and that's nothing against the farmers. We're now people who would love to pay a lot more than we can afford to our staff. But yeah, it gave us the opportunity to learn how to farm while working.
So working with a farm is essential, getting that educational background,
I think
learning
for us,
from people.
Learning from people.
There's, I mean, there's also like weekend courses, there's evening courses that you can take. Haliburton offers one too. There's like there's the Gaia Garden.
We do a grow your own food program. There's lots of learning opportunities out there to sort
There's
of
also
start
a lot of podcasts.
Oh man, there are some fantastic podcasts.
And I would like to
knowledge podcast. Actually, no, that's super important, because another mentor of ours, and this is always a little bit of a tearjerker for me. His name was Chris Blanchard, and
he passed away last summer, but he was a farmer for many years in the States, and an educator and a consultant, and he started a farming podcast a few years ago, and it was called Farmer to Farmer, and he interviewed, and it was a farming podcast for farmers, right? So that's something that there's a lot of things out there about food and the sort of the talking about the food system and kind of things we've been talking about. This was a production farm, like exactly how do you do that in a language that was meant for farmers to be listening to while they were out farming. So that is, he was talking to farmers all around North America, and the most value we got is from listening to farmers who have been doing it for a long time, right? So the people that don't necessarily have books, they don't necessarily have YouTube channels, but they have been out there farming for decades. And that, without podcasts, we never would have had access to that sort of information, right? These aren't the people who, like I said, who are writing books, not to slam the people who are writing books, that's a huge resource as well.
us,
But it's just different. It's people who are giving really detailed production knowledge.
They have so much knowledge, but they don't have the platform to share it.
And it's just not,
And this is one of the reasons why we started this podcast, It was to bring in local people, talk with them, and
Local
then try.
knowledge.
Yeah, exactly.
And keep the conversation going. So,
Exactly.
so Chris would always say at the end of his podcast, keep the tractor running. And I always saw that not just as like, like actually keep the tractor going because
Keep farming.
keep farming, but keep the conversation going. And which
Right.
this is important what you guys do
Right.
too, right? This is like, you need to share that communal knowledge that's out there in all different facets, whether it's farming, whether it's, running a restaurant or a small business, or the plethora of podcasts that you guys have facilitated so far. Like, it's important to be able to have those voices from the community out there for the rest of the community to hear. And
you know what?
Chris Blanchard was a fantastic facilitator for that larger farming community too.
And I want to say
And
something.
continuing that conversation.
Yeah.
Like you said.
It's funny that you mentioned that farmer to farm, because that's exactly the podcast that I listened to yesterday.
Oh, awesome!
I was getting motivated.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get a nice background knowledge,
Good.
and that and the Revenant.
Yeah,
It's another
who's
podcast.
Local,
Yeah.
BC. Yeah.
Exactly. So I listened to both of those, and if you guys are interested, I would like to keep having you just to talk about very specific little crops or.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Because we barely even crossed out some of the things that
Exactly. We had so much
You
stuff.
guys had a lot of questions
Yeah.
there.
Keep on talking.
Just come on, man. Just like the soil has all sorts of layers. Like everything, whether it's farming, whether it's running a restaurant, or
Exactly.
running a bank or whatever. Like there's all sorts of layers, right?
There's a lot of layers, and this is the first layer with you guys.
Yes. Yeah.
And what is the message that you guys would like to say out there? What is
Before
words
you
of
guys get
wisdom?
going, because I know you guys.
Yeah.
I know you guys didn't go.
Thanks for being cognizant.
If you were to choose one message, what would it be?
Yeah, it's the one that I think you hear most from farmers, but it's just be engaged in what you're eating, and be open to the idea that there's a multitude of ways to produce food, but really you're going to learn from talking to the people who are producing your food. So come to the farmers market.
Yay!
Start
Come to
building
the
a
farmers.
relationship with your food.
Yeah, and that doesn't
Yeah.
have to be at the farmer's market. It can just, be by listening
On
to
your own,
podcasts.
yeah,
it can be by
exactly.
reading the ingredient lists on stuff that you're
But
buying in the
really,
grocery store.
go to the
And
farmer's market.
I mean that is to our benefit for sure if you come to the farmer's market. But yeah, it comes down to food is really political, and that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It means that we have agency through our food choices, and that's a huge way that we can deal with climate change, deal with resiliency, deal with how we want to structure our community and how we want to engage with our neighbors and the people around us is through our food. And I think one of the reasons I got into that is because it's a good news story. We hear so much about what's going wrong in terms of climate change and all these things that we feel totally disempowered and we have no control over, but we're eating multiple times a day, and that's somewhere where we actually can have agency in a really positive way, and it can be fun and it can be engaging. And when there's so many bad news stories, it's really nice to have the ability to make some change in the world in a way that, you're going to do it anyways. You're going to eat something.
Exactly.
So what we need to have discussions around more is how we make good food accessible, because
Good
right
food
now it's
accessible.
not necessarily as accessible as we would like to see. How do we
I
make
agree.
it so that farmers can make a living wage, but so that people can also access that food? Like we need to, we need to have a bigger political discussion.
I truly believe that farmers are heroes. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you. And just one thing to add on that is if going into if spending your money is a way of voting, essentially.
Yeah.
You're never wasting your vote going to the farmer's market. You're investing in your community. You're investing in people that are out not just for the environment. They're out for your health and well-being as well. You just can't go wrong in investing in your community. And so whether that is
100% agree.
whether that's getting clothes or soaps or anything, like any small business that's at that market, those are people that are working hard for their community, and they want to be able to do that and provide that for the people in that. And that's a pretty beautiful thing. You can't really go wrong.
That's
putting
what we're
money
all
there.
about.
Yeah.
And last one, what excites you nowadays?
Yes, we like this question. question.
The anticipation of maybe being able to go on a bike ride with.
I mean, we're at a really good time of the year in general for putting stuff into the ground, and we're gonna hopefully be able to pick a lot of beautiful food. Yeah. I think that the reason that most farmers keep farming is because they get a seed catalog every December, and there's a bunch of new and exciting stuff in it that they want to try. I think most farmers are pretty creative people that maybe have a little bit of a scatterbrainness, and they always want to be doing something new and trying something new. And there's always next year,
it's exciting.
And there's always a new crop you can try. You can always do something in a new way. So what I think I'm really excited about some of the new things that we're growing on the farm.
That is so beautiful because it's so exciting to see something you created.
Yeah.
And then you harvest it and you taste it and then you provide it to the community and it's a good feeling, I bet.
It's a great career for people who get bored easily.
And that's
why I am a farmer, because I get bored easily.
And
that is so interesting.
That's what excites me the most too, is like we also have a pretty unique opportunity in that we work with other businesses as well, farming businesses that, they're going to have their own successes and challenges, and we get to, not just learn from that, but like be a part of that and be, whether it's a part of the solution or whatnot, like we're all kind of in this together, and, so we all get to learn from each other, and we get to see other people, reap the benefits of that as well.
Yeah. And we would be remiss, we could end on that nice note that John just put, but we would be remiss in not marketing ourselves better, and that we're also really excited that we're doing our own community supported agriculture food box program this year.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be a way that we really like to engage with people as they come and pick up food. Yeah. We've chosen the best of what we have available every week, and they come pick up food from us on the farm. So that's a different type of relationship to build with customers, and that's something that we're really passionate about.
That's awesome. I know what excites Manuel and I both is talking to people like yourselves that are very passionate about what they do and have deep reasonings for what they do, because that's what I said this earlier, but we can relate heavily to it because we like to reflect on our actions heavy and deep, and look deep down in on why we're doing things. And talking to you guys, you can see it when you're talking to you, and I'm looking at you, you can see it in your eyes, and you get stoked on what you're saying, and we believe you because you can just radiates out of you.
Well, from listening to your guys' previous podcast, like you guys ask great questions, and thanks. I mean, like, look, we weren't even able to, like, there's such great questions that this whole entire page, there's 5 things that are scratched out.
I think we touched on
some, but I mean, you guys ask deep questions that are multi-layered, and that's important because there's a lot of layers to.
There's a lot of layers to everything.
To everything, and I mean.
So do you guys have upcoming interviews that you're excited about?
Yeah.
That you want to
we do.
Give people a little preview?
We have one with...
they're called Hangers Adventures. Mm-hmm. So they are an inspiring couple. They're adventurers, and they travel around the world.
Cool.
So they rode across the Pacific and across the Atlantic.
Holy moly.
Now they're building their own autonomous vessel. And
wow.
I met them at our engineering event. Yeah. So we contacted them, and we're very excited about that.
And we have Derek Powell coming in.
Yeah, Derek Powell is coming.
Coming in and talking
very
about
excited
farming,
about him.
Community work, music.
Music producer,
working with, having a brother with a disability. His older brother, Gary, who I know well. I've known the Powell family for the last 15 years because we played soccer together.
Oh, awesome.
Or he coached me, and they're just a strong member in that. The soccer community.
Yeah. Overall, we are very excited to talk to
anybody.
People.
And if you guys have suggestions of people that we should talk to, we're all for it.
Excellent. Yeah.
So we'll keep the conversation. We'll keep the tractor.
We'll keep the tractor running.
Keep the tractor running.
Yeah.
And thank you for coming. And where can we find you?
At fiercelovefarm.ca.
Fiercelovefarm.ca. They are
Instagram at fiercelovefarm, and of course in person every Saturday at the Moss Street Market under the blue Haliburton Community Organic Farm.
Yes,
beautiful. There you have it.
Yeah, and you can also engage with the other great farmers in that. Cooperative too, at the farmers market, or even at the Haliburton farm stall, which is going to be open for an open house
The first weekend of May.
First weekend of
Sunday
May.
First Sunday of May. At what time?
10 o'clock.
10 to 2.
10 to 2.
Come
Open
on.
house. Haliburton Farm.
At Haliburton Farm, we'll be doing a plant sale.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So if you need tomato
We'll be there.
plants,
Wait, the first week of May?
yeah, first Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
the 4th or 5th.
4th? 5th? Oh, yeah. It's the 5th.
Yeah.
It's the 5th. Perfect.
Yeah.
I come from Hawaii on the 4th, so
Oh, perfect.
be there.
May the 4th be with you. Revenge of the 5th.
And for those of you who like this podcast and who are interested on keep on listening, we are Adventuring for Knowledge. You can find us at adventuringforknowledge.com. We have an Instagram, Facebook, we have Twitter, LinkedIn, and yeah, we're on all podcasting apps. And thank you to our editor.
Mr. Trainer Peters.
Keep the good job, buddy.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone, and have a beautiful day.
And never stop adventuring for knowledge.
And get out there, go into your community, and get
Engage, get stoked,
get stoked, and talk to farmers.
reflect on your
farmers are
your
awesome.
reasonings, and get at it, people.
And please remember to be active in your community. Brody, come on. Keep going.
Remember to smile.
Remember to be kind and respect yourself, others, animals, and a beautiful planet.
And please, never stop adventuring for knowledge.
Until next time.
Peace.